Thank you, Naomi, for coming in today and agreeing to do this artist interview with me. You're one of the seminal people in my life that's influenced the direction that my art has gone from, and you were the natural choice for me for this interview, so I really...
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome.
Really special.
So your style has changed a lot over the years, and I'm intrigued by that whole journey and the style of painting that you started with and the whole career change. Okay. So I want to explore all those things with you today.
Yep.
So, Naomi, you trained in textile and design, and you're now a painter. Can you just explain to me how that happened?
Sure. Well, I was actually pretty lucky because when I was fresh out of high school, I'd done really good scores in textiles and maths, and they let me into a diploma when I was 16. So I was able to, I know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know. So I was able to have that all finished up when I was about 19 and a half. And then I did go into a couple of bridal stores, and I worked as a seamstress and did some design and stuff like that. So that was a couple of my first jobs. And then I wanted to get out and explore like Australia a bit more. So I started travelling around. I lived in lots of small places. All of my sewing stuff was all boxed up. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't, like, you know, you have to have a lot of space to make patterns and all that kind of stuff.
A table kind of like what we're sitting
on. So I didn't have access to all that stuff, and it was a number of years where I was sort of traveling from state to state and, you know, living in like share houses and stuff like that. And then at some point I really needed to be creative again, and I was still in that situation, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to do it on a smaller scale, or, you know, and so I just went to a craft shop and I bought some canvas and bought some paint, and I just wanted to create something pretty to put on my wall, and I thought that would satisfy me, and it did, and I loved it. And then I painted more, and it just kind of kept happening. Yeah.
So I'm really intrigued that it's just like this happenstance, you know, this kind of almost a happy accident that
definitely
you just did something different, and then suddenly it just clicked for you.
Yeah, and it was kind of like I did get that feeling of, oh wow, I think I'm supposed to be doing something like this. And so I thought, oh, this is a nice little hobby, you know, something that I can do. And yes, I started taking some of those homewares to markets as well. Yeah. That's kind of how it started.
And, you know, leading on from the markets is exactly where you actually got your first big opportunity to do something more, to take another step in that painting career. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It was a couple, husband and wife. They were local to those markets, and they just sort of came through and they looked at my stuff and they said, "Have you ever exhibited before?" And I said, "No." Like I didn't see myself as an exhibiting artist. I didn't see myself as an artist. I sort of just thought I was creating some fun things for people to, you know, buy as gifts and whatever. Yeah. And so they asked me that, and I said no, and they said, well, you know, we're actually wanting to get some artists together who haven't exhibited before and help them have that opportunity and find a gallery and put a group show together. And I said I'd be interested, and yeah, so they kept in contact. We all met up with the other artists and we made it happen. And so I had my first exhibition 2011 at Circle Gallery through their help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look at the opportunity that comes your way when you say yes.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Rather like that time that you walked into my house and looked at the art that I'd done on my wall and said, I'd like to offer you an opportunity. You should be exhibiting. It just rings true that things circle around a little bit, don't they?
Absolutely. And it's just having that nice community of people around you, I think. And, you know, that's kind of what I did from there, like from the gallery exhibition. I just started putting myself, because I had to question myself, like, what am I doing now? Am I an artist? You know, am I going to do something, make a career of this? So I started putting myself in a lot of networking groups, and like I joined a lot of artist associations, and just kept like going to a lot of things like this, so I could keep my ear to the ground about things that were coming up and sort of see what opportunities were there for me to like I guess just take that little step towards emerging into the art industry.
Becoming a breakout artist.
Yeah, yeah. And I just started off with cafes and small group shows and stuff like that. None that were at a gallery for a little while, and then I worked up the courage to call a gallery and say, could I, apply for this group exhibition? And they said yes. And that was the Art and Design Precinct at the time in West End.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find Aspire Gallery does a lot of that kind of thing at the moment, and they actually like to have you on their books as an emerging artist, and you pay a small fee, and then they include you in things automatically all the time. And I just think nice. For a gallery to do that for emerging artists, like it helps, and it ties right into what you're saying about, sometimes you have to be really proactive. And other times opportunity comes knocking.
Well, that's true.
And it's when do you say yes for any of those,
Yeah.
Is the critical path that can determine largely how the rest of your, creative career will go.
Definitely.
I think,
and I think like when you're making those choices, to begin with, it's really, I would recommend, honestly, just putting your foot in wherever you can, just to get a feel for what are those types of galleries that work well with your style, or work well, like what are they doing for you? How does it benefit both parties? And that you're making those connections with those people and all that kind of stuff. And so I pretty much said yes to almost everything to start with. And then, but now, like, I have to be a little bit more careful because there are time constraints, obviously. And now that I'm working more on solo shows, I've got to make sure that I'm giving myself that time to create that body of work.
And it's got to be a higher standard, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It's not cafe style art,
So I do say no a lot more often than what I used to now. So, but I think that's part of the change that you go through as you're working out, what steps to take for your career.
And based on the steps that you take for your career, which exhibition do you define as your favourite or your most satisfying?
I think my last solo, I really, I got a lot out of that. I had, the year before I had been on an art residency in Finland, and I did have an exhibition in Helsinki, and I took a body of works that, where I was experimenting more with my acrylic skins, and so I can show. Actually, some of these pieces here.
You have to hold them up.
Yeah, what I took with me to Finland. So this one is just created completely out of paint. So there's nothing else in this at all. It's just skins layered on top of each other over and over. So I can show you just what a skin is. This is one that I've just peeled off this week from my surface. I do create them this way. So each of the colours that are at the foreground were put down first, and then they just layered up and up and up until I've got something that's solid enough to peel off, and then that becomes this piece here. Yeah. So this has been created with quite a few of those. I think about 400 layers.
And how long did it take you to actually build those layers up?
Well, at the time, it took like about a year because I was only doing a layer per day, or if the weather was quite good and the conditions were good, I could do maybe 2 layers in a day. So it took a really long time. I have now worked out that if I have several surfaces to work across, I can shorten that time quite a bit. So this was the first of this kind of artwork that I made, and I'm getting better at making them quicker now.
I just think that's so unique. I just haven't seen another artist just layering paint like that, and it negates the need for a canvas, which I think is ingenious.
I know, it's a little bit different, and I mean they can sort of sit on the table as well, so they can stand or they can be flat. So it just depends on what the whoever purchases it decides that they want to do with it. And then
these are my favourite. Pick them up.
So have one. Have a little play.
That is just like gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm so intrigued.
Well, what happens is, like, when I have, this is the raw piece obviously, but I like to crop it before I put it into a frame or use it for a sculpture.
Yeah.
And so I cut little slithers down the side, and that's what these are actually made out of. So I just have, you know, they're usually about this sort of long or a bit shorter, just a slither of dried up paint skin, and I just make it into a little ball, the first one, and then just keep winding more and more onto it. And it's amazing, they actually just stick to themselves.
I was just going to ask that, do you have to glue them? But
I
you
don't have to do anything like that.
Because the plastic nature of it.
Exactly.
Do you like use a little bit of heat, like you leave them in a warm environment to allow that bonding to occur?
I usually will, and I will use them right after I've peeled them off. So that's when they're still just a little bit tacky. Yeah, and then I'll use them straight away, and I won't give them too much time to dry before I make those. So those were a couple of the sculptures that I took to Helsinki with me. I did use Australian colours as much as I could, because I wanted to sort of take our environment over there for an exhibition. And
because the colour palettes are very different, aren't they?
So different, and that's why I chose Finland, because I did want completely different inspiration for landscapes. I came back with so many ideas to do a show here with similar techniques, but using their landscape as a reference.
Ah,
yeah.
So talking about technique, and this is something that I find really interesting. It's like that light bulb or aha moment. You had one of those when you picked up a palette knife.
Oh, yeah. And I brought my palette knives here too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So these are my 3 sizes. These are my babies. They
look like babies. Look
like
how gorgeous that is.
You can see they're quite well used. I like the palette knives that have a nice deep angle through here, because that helps you to use them without actually touching your fingers or knuckles onto the surface.
Yeah.
So when they're a bit more shallow in there, it's harder to use them the way that I do. So I wanted to bring them to show you.
I know they look. An artist's tools are so unique to the artist, and I'm so glad you brought them in, because I think they just suit you.
Yeah, they do. They do. And it was kind of just a chance happening again. I was doing my first solo, and at the time I was still quite experimental, and I hadn't found my style yet. I was using a lot of different mediums, and I had about a week left. So I had this nice body of work, and I had about a week left, and I thought, you know what, I want to do more. I think I can do a couple more paintings. What am I going to do? And I found these I think that they're from my childhood, I don't know, but they've been traveling around with me for a really long time, and I had never used them, and I thought, I'm just going to give it a go. So I first of all just sort of did a background, and I loved it. It was like putting icing on a cake. It was just like the feeling of it was so different to using a paintbrush, and so I loved that. And then I actually did 3 quite large canvases in this week. It was a nice sort of quick process. I worked on all 3 of them at the same time, adding layers as the other one was drying. And I loved the outcome so much. That style, it just felt like it was my style. I put those 3 last canvases in my solo, and at that time I wished I had another few months or so to be able to have produced more. I wished that whole solo was palette knife paintings. So that's where I decided I'm not going back to the paintbrush. This is it. This is me.
Okay, so we've got an example of something that's more modern, with you using this technique. And can you just talk to me too, because often palette knife technique is linked with bold expressionism rather than delicate strokes. And I know particularly when I use a palette knife, I love to have really thick paint and really just kind of put it on in one layer when I'm doing that. So what is it that's changed about your style in relation, you know, when you pick that up?
Yeah, well, I think I've always been a minimalist by nature anyway, in my artwork and just in my life. So I do tend to not mix colours on a palette. I don't really even use a palette. I generally will I use paint in tins, and I will generally dip my palette knife into the tin and just go straight onto the canvas that I'm working on. And so
does that mean that your colour choices are limited? Like if you think about that you've translated through your layering the same kind of idea into this style of painting where you're painting one layer at a time in one colour. Where often a palette knife is used to blend colours in a seamless transition. You're using it in a slightly different way.
Well, I often will also, especially when I'm painting on canvas or canvas board, I will try to do that painting all in one go rather than let layers dry as much as I can. And so that's how you kind of do get little blending. As I've gone from one colour to the next, I will wash my palette knife and go to that next colour. But as I move that colour next to the colour before it will blend. And so that's kind of the style that I like to get out of that blending, rather than blending onto a palette first and then putting those colours together. And then with my smaller palette knife, I often like to sort of just draw in with that. So I actually use the very tip of it, and I will draw figures and stuff like that with a palette knife rather than with a paintbrush or with a pencil.
Almost. So is that similar to like a sgraffito technique? Are you sort of scratching into the wet paint a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
Initially to get that form.
Yeah. So it gets too busy through the process of through that journey of creating the artwork, then I will just use a background colour to cut back into all of that and just take some of that busyness out of it, so I can get that feeling, that mood that I like, where it's a bit more minimalistic.
So leading on from this, the artist usually says, my most favourite exhibition is my next exhibition.
Yes.
And so you have a major exhibition coming up. Tell me just a little bit about that in closing.
Sure. So that's coming up at Logan Art Gallery, and it's called Seasons May Change. It's all about what I can see from my studio window, which I don't have an amazing view. Like, I would love to have mountains or something like that, but I don't. I'm like, it faces my next door neighbour's fence line, but I do have the sky that I can see, and I've got a beautiful poinciana tree and some other like plants and stuff along the other side as well. So what I'm doing is I'm using a colour per day. It has been a process over the last 2 years, and the colour is just a reference to what's happening outside that window. So whether it's the sun shining, then I might use some bright yellows or oranges or stuff like that. If there's pink or red in the sky, I might use that day as one of the layers. If it's raining, if I've got new plants coming out, I'll take references from all of those things that are happening outside that window. And then with that colour, I've got several canvas supports and several skins that I'm working on all at the same time, and on that day I will choose which ones to put that colour onto to create another layer to that artwork. I liked that it could kind of show a timeline of the weather that's in my local area, which is, where I'm having the exhibition is local to me as well. So I thought that might be interesting for the community to kind of see that, and also the techniques and the different types of artworks that I'm creating. I thought, well, why not put those out into my community and let them see what I'm
Fabulous.
doing.
I have a goal to do the same thing that you're doing one day, and I would I draw so much inspiration from you. I just want to thank you for being my guest today.
It's been a pleasure.
I
loved it.
Thank you so much. Give me a
Anything
hug.
I can do to support.
Yeah. All right.